Russian investigators are trying to find out what brought down a Russian jet over Egypt. Officials believe the airliner broke apart midair on Saturday, killing all 224 people on board. Russian authorities have ruled out technical error or a mistake by the crew. Director of National Intelligence James Clapper says there's no evidence yet to suggest this was a terror attack, but it remains a possibility.
ISIL, in a tweet, claimed responsibility for it, and there is a very aggressive ISIL chapter in the Sinai, but we really don't know, and I think once the black boxes have been analyzed, and which they've recovered, then perhaps we'll know more.
Does ISIS have the ability to shoot down an airliner?
It's unlikely, but I wouldn't rule it out.
CBS News senior national security correspondent David Martin is with us from the Pentagon. David, thanks for being here. This comment by James Clapper, I guess the question a lot of people are going to have, given that this aircraft was flying at 33,000 feet, we know that some terror groups have man-pads. Those are the shoulder-fired surface-to-air missiles. Does ISIS, though, have the capability or the equipment to shoot down an airliner at 33,000 feet?
Not so far as is known, and that is a fairly significant piece of equipment, a surface-to-air missile that can go up to that altitude. And the U.S. keeps pretty close tabs on what is happening in the Sinai because, although it's unknown to most people, the U.S. actually has about 700 troops in the Sinai. They've been there for nearly 4 decades as part of a peacekeeping force for enforcing the Camp David Accords signed between Egypt and Israel. And part of enforcing those accords is to conduct surveillance flights over the Sinai. So the U.S. would be acutely interested in any anti-aircraft missiles that were in the Sinai. So it's sort of hard to picture a scenario in which ISIS gets its hands on a piece of equipment like that and it goes unnoticed. But you always have to put in the caveat, you don't know what you don't know. But I think the more likely scenario, if this were a terrorist attack, would be a bomb placed aboard the aircraft, either somehow gotten through security in a piece of luggage or through security being carried by a passenger who was willing to give up his or her life.
And David, several jihadist websites, social media have taken, saying that ISIS is taking credit for this because of Russian military action, recent military action in Syria. So even if that is just a claim that is being made by these jihadis, what is Russia's next move?
Well, Russia is in Syria. It is now being fairly open about this. Russia is bombing in Syria to prop up the regime of Bashar al-Assad. It said at the beginning, Vladimir Putin said at the beginning that they were going to attack ISIS in Syria, and that you would think might be a motive for someone why ISIS would want to attack a Russian airliner. But in fact, what has happened is that very few Russian airstrikes have been conducted against what would be considered ISIS targets. Almost all of them are well away from ISIS-controlled territory against other opposition groups that are threatening the regime of the Assad regime. So if this were somehow connected to ISIS, it could certainly step up strikes against ISIS targets in Syria. But ISIS is a very decentralized location. So it's unlikely that a terrorist attack in the Sinai would have been hatched and directed from someplace in Syria. These chapters, as the Director of National Intelligence called them, operate pretty much on their own with very little supervision from what you would consider the leadership of ISIS in Syria.
David Martin reporting from the Pentagon. David, thank you.
Sure thing.